I have a couple of questions for you tonight. Something, to ask yourself, something to ponder and reflect on. And there's no right or wrong answer. And I'm not going to go around with a microphone and ask you what the answer to the question is. You don't have to share your answer with anyone unless you choose to sit down with someone and have a conversation about it. And the question is, how do you experience God these days in your life as it is right now? In your deepest, most personal thoughts, your feelings, your attitudes, and your actions. In your faith, or even sometimes in a lack of faith. Is God someone who is really real to you? In fact, is God for you a someone? Is God a personal, living, relational other with whom you interact on a daily basis, or maybe a couple of days a week, or however you do it, in speech and thoughts and affection and just the way you are? Does God seem nearby to you? Does God seem concerned and present and active in your life? Or is God distant, absent, unavailable, inaccessible, silent? Another question is what is your life like now? Are you happy? Are you troubled? Are you something in between? A little bit of good, a little bit of bad? Are things going well for you personally, physically, financially, and spiritually? Do you struggle in some places in your life? Again, there's no right or wrong answer here, and no one is going to ask you to talk about it. There's no public disclosure. But these are just some questions that we can ask ourselves occasionally. They're a way that we can kind of, take our pulse and see, check the heartbeat of our life. See what our relationship with God and with ourselves and with others and with life is like at any given time. The words of the prophet Baruch in our first reading and of John the Baptist in the Gospel were originally addressed to a people whose pulse would have been very weak indeed. Baruch's audience was the people of Jerusalem, who had been led away many years before into exile by the Babylonians. And as a people, they were virtually dead. They had lost their land. They had lost their temple, the place where they believed that God was present. They lost their national identity. Things would have looked very bleak for them, maybe even hopeless for a lot of them. They were, as Baruch describes the city of Jerusalem, wrapped in a robe of mourning and misery. What a symbol, to be wrapped in a robe of mourning and misery. Defeat, loneliness, homesickness, depression. These are, feelings and states that, maybe some of us have felt at times. That's how the people were at that time. But Baruch comes to them, and this is towards the end of his book. The first part was a little bit rougher, but at the end of the book, he comes to them with glad tidings. He has good news for them, good news of great joy. These exiles who had been away from their home were going to go home now, and God was going to come and lead them home. And Baruch calls to Jerusalem. He says, "Get up, stand up. Stand up on the heights and look to the east and see your children. Look to the place of the dawn. Look to the rising of new light, and look to that direction from which the exiles would come home, that they would return. And God is going to make it easy for them. God commands that every lofty mountain be made low, that the age-old depths and gorges be filled up to level ground. In other words, God is going to transform the very creation that he had made so that the people could return home and God's glory would be seen by all people everywhere. As John the Baptist says in the gospel, quoting the prophet Isaiah, he says, all flesh will see the salvation of God. All humanity will see this. It'll be a public act. John also appeared and spoke to a people who were defeated, an oppressed and despairing people. These weren't exiles. These were the Jews who actually did, in fact, return to Jerusalem after 50 years or so in exile. And they came back to Jerusalem, really, and, a few centuries before Jesus. And Baruch's prophecy was fulfilled. But now the people suffered in a different way. Before they were in exile, now they were in their home, but they were under military and political occupation by this time by the Romans. Jerusalem was constantly being invaded and taken, and the people were taken away and come back. And now it's the Romans. And God had given the people their land back, but now they didn't have their freedom. They didn't have their autonomy. And again, they found themselves in a hopeless situation. And this is the people that the Messiah was going to come to, a despairing people. That's why, when we sing that, O come, Emmanuel, you listen to it, and it's a very mournful kind of song, because these are people who are waiting for the Messiah to come. So like Baruch, John promises this transformation of the world. Again, he talks about the valleys are going to be filled in, the mountains and the hills are going to be made low, the winding roads are going to be made straight, the way of salvation is going to be open wide. But this time, it's not going to be the people coming back from exile that are on that road. This time, God himself is coming to his people. God is coming to save his people. The name Jesus, in Hebrew, Yeshua, means God saves. God came to earth. God came to his people. He came to the world in the person of Jesus of Nazareth. And all flesh has seen the salvation of God. Not all flesh have believed it. Not all flesh recognize it for what it is, but all flesh has seen in the person of Jesus Christ the salvation of God. The world that you and I live in right now, for all its problems, for all its shortcomings, is a world that has been visited and touched by God. God himself has come to earth and has touched it. And our final healing and salvation and restoration has already begun. It's not finished. We're not experiencing the full fruits of it, but it has begun. And for us who have seen the salvation of God and who have believed it, and who now center our minds and hearts and lives on Jesus Christ, the world is a very different place. Even if it doesn't always seem different, even if we don't always experience it as different, the world is forever changed. And, to be sure, there are times when we experience ourselves as exiles. We feel far from God. We feel far from the kind of people that we want to be. We're far from the truth. We're far from our spiritual home, our own Jerusalem, which can be nothing else but that center of our lives where God dwells, that we are so distracted that we can't access that. We're in exile. At times we experience oppression. We might feel like we're occupied by forces other than us. We can be imprisoned by old emotional wounds, by damaged relationships, personal failings, sin, addictions, anger, sadness, despair. There's all kind of evil that comes at us. The mountains sometimes can seem very high, and the valleys can seem very low, and the roads can appear to be twisting and turning like we're never going to get to our destination. And right there, God calls us, and he says, get up, repent, look to the east, look to the dawn, look to that new light that's coming into our lives. God is not far away from us. Sometimes we think of God as way out there in heaven or out there with somebody else, but God is not far from us. God is right here, as a matter of fact. And we are not hopelessly oppressed no matter what we struggle with in life. God comes to set us free. By our own power, we can never bring ourselves close to God. By our own power, we can never truly and fully overcome the things that oppress us, the things that lead us away from God. It is God that comes to us. It's God who sets us free. God comes and flattens the mountains of our lives, fills in the valleys, straightens the roads that separate us from God, and God will clear everything out of the way to come to us. God will do it. What we can do, probably the only thing we can do, and what we really need to do, is to answer that prophetic call that we hear today from Baruch and from John and from the season of Advent. Get up, look up, repent, and be prepared. Pray, fast. You know, we don't often think about Advent as a time of fasting, but there is fasting. It used to be part of Advent, and it still can be today. Not like Lent, but there are still times during Advent where we should spend fasting from food or from television or, whatever it is, to spend time focusing and turning our direction towards God. We need to try to increase our love and devotion to God, our love for others. During this time, we strive to live holy lives. We strive to be freed from the sins that keep us down, and that's, why we always have Advent reconciliation services all over the diocese, so that we can be set free from what is holding us back. This is a time to turn our eyes and our bodies and our hearts, our minds and our soul towards God and God alone, and stay fixed on God like the point of a compass stays fixed on magnetic north. We face God and we stay facing towards God. God alone can bring us to our true home. God alone can free us from oppression. God alone can save us and heal us and bring us true peace. God alone loves you and me enough to where he came to live with us and to heal us and to suffer everything that we suffer and to die with us so that we can live with him in perfect freedom, perfect peace, and perfect happiness now and forever. The Lord is coming soon. The Lord is coming right now. Be prepared. The Lord is near. Rush out to meet him. Rush out to welcome him into your life.